you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I'd like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to give you an inspirational morning. My guest is Greg Stallworth, and we are talking about his book, Behind My Storm. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Greg. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Good morning, Dr. Chester.
I am so glad that you are here today. Now, as is the custom of our show, we always give our authors an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps the few people out there that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. So my first question is, tell us a little bit about you. What makes you you?
Well, what makes me me is I am a author of 3 books. I am a retired social worker, an individual who had worked with children and families for over 30 years. So I bring my experience working with individual families and communities to the stage where I was able to start the literary process of writing.
Now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that that was just the next thing along your life's path?
That was something I always wanted to do. I always had an affinity for writing, always used writing as a way of expression. And what was interesting is that it goes all the way back to my junior high school days when you come back off of summer break. The teacher asked me to ask everybody to write about their summer. It's supposed to be 1 page. I ended up writing 14 pages and kind of got in trouble for it. So, but she talked to me and we worked it out. And as I was leaving the classroom, she made a candid joke. She said, "Greg, look at me. Next time, why don't you just write a book?" And that stayed with me for all my life. And here I am, author of 3 books, and taken from the teacher's candid remarks, humorous remarks, why don't I write a book, way back at early ages, sparked me to do what I'm doing now.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's really funny that you mentioned that, because we have some people in our lives when we were young people or when we were kids that were they were commenting, and in some ways they were trying to be facetious. You know, there was a little bit of malicious sarcasm intent there, right? And then there were some people that were really and truly speaking prophetically over our lives. They saw that spark in us, and they could really and truly see that something was going to be different. I tell you, I personally appreciate each person, because each person it truly gave you that spark, that challenge, if you will, to go on and do that thing. So I'm glad that she said write a book, because you have certainly done that. I love it. I love it. Now, the title of your book, Behind My Storm, very interesting title. You must tell us, how did you come up with that?
Well, I came up with it, it's quite interesting, Dr. Chester. I came up with it in the April of 2020, right at the time when the World Health Organization, WHO, committed to the fact that we were in a pandemic worldwide. And I thought about what individual families and communities was going to go through this pandemic. And one of the things I prayed on it, and I really prayed on it to God, let me use my gift to reach out to individual families and communities. So, through the grace of God, I was able to not only think of ways to inspire individuals to keep going through this most perilous time, but also able to bring 10 women together to share their a part of their lives, what we call storms, and how they got behind that storm through the grace of God, how they was able to overcome obstacles and barriers. And shortly, I'll just share this. We all use the 5 principles of life, what we call prayer, perseverance, purpose, patience, and peace, reaching to the point of peace so we can instill within each other to go out and help others too who may be going through some difficult times, Dr. Chester.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, what made you decide to choose an anthology involving women?
You know, there's when I grew up, Dr. Chester, when I grew up, I remember my mother and my grandmother going through what we used to call verbal suppression. Even in the home, certain things they couldn't say that has happened to them, things that went on in their life that they wasn't out of shame, out of threats, out of, I remember my grandmother say, don't tell nothing that goes on in this house. And
Right.
a lot of the women went through it from childhood to adult life. And as you know, when you suppress something within you, it eventually bothers you and it can affect your mental and emotional health. So, I thought, wow, if I can do 2 things, bring, women together to share their storm, their situation, but to tell the world how they were able to overcome the obstacles and barriers through prayer, through inspiration, to hopefully inspire others who are not there yet. So that's the whole meaning of bringing an anthology of women together to share their storm and how they got behind their storm.
Oh, yes. I love that. I love that. And you are so right. It's funny that you say that because I was just talking with my mother the other day and I said, I wonder where women would be, speaking about my grandmother's generation in particular, and my grandmother was born in 1900, saying if they had the empowerment that we had today, where would they be? What would they have done differently, considering the rules, regulations, the laws, and all of that were not the same then? And this is including all women, women of color, our non-women of color, just it was different. And you are so right. They held on to so much and still was able to raise their families and turn out great kids. So you are so right there. Now, reading your book, for someone who wants to pick up a copy, do you suggest that they read it from cover to cover? Should they digest it as though, like in chapters to really take it all in? What's your suggestion there?
I strongly suggest, Doctor, that they read it from cover to cover. And here's my reasoning. Each storm, as we call it, or one's life, part of life story, is very intense. And it carries on from one of the authors to the other. For example, we have 2 of our authors who are breast cancer survivors. We have we have one who had a liver transplant and went through severe depression. So a lot of women can understand that and relate to that. And just to be able to, flow into the book and really understand and get a real understanding, I would strongly suggest reading cover to cover and then going back into the book and selected stories or storms, as we call it, to get more involved in it. But my suggestion is go through from cover to cover and then maybe come back and review certain authors' writings.
I like that idea because you don't really know what to expect yet. So read it all the way through, get cover to cover, and then go back and get those little nuances that perhaps you missed the first time, or be able to go a little bit deeper. The same way that we do, when we read not only our textbook, but scripture as well. We read it the first time, and the first time is great because it's new. But when you go back, you get to go even deeper. I love that suggestion. Now, overall, and I love that you call them storms. I think that is a great name for that. What is the overall message of your book? The way that you've placed it and the way that you have put the stories together and outlaid it for everyone. What is the overall message, or what is the one thing you want for a reader of the book to remember once they're done?
It's that whatever they have went through or going through, they can be, through the grace of God, they can be inspired. They can get through it. They can overcome obstacles and barriers in their life. And if you we always say, if you use the 5 principles of life, which is mentioned in the Bible and in scriptures, is that, if you can pray, if you can persevere after you pray, just get through it. If you can have a purpose to keep going through even through the perseverance, and being patient, waiting on God's blessings to instill on you. Typically, peace shows up and it makes you a better person, not only to yourself, but to your family, your community, and the world.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, Greg, it is time for us to go to break. So before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Well, the book is titled Behind My Storm. The book is available at Amazon.com. And for those who would like to be in contact with us, you can go to our website, which is www.behindmystorm.com.
I love it. Already, everyone you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for our Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. My guest today is Greg Stallworth, and we're talking about his book, Behind My Storm. I know, that is a great title. Now, Greg, my next question for you is, what are some of the life situations that the women share in your book, Behind My Storm? You kind of touched on it a little bit before on the other side of the break. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, don't tell it all, because listeners, you know what I'm going to say, right? You got to buy the book to get the full story. But can you tell us a little bit more about some of the stories the women have shared?
Sure can. It's a variable of stories that, or what we call storms, sorry, women who have survived cancer, who are cancer survivors. One of our women had a liver transplant, and the doctor only gave her several days to live because they could not find a match. But through the grace of God, she's still here. And that was back in 1973, when liver transplants wasn't the most, advanced stages. We have one of the women who is an amputee who, instead of giving up, she kept going through the grace of God. She had opportunities and thoughts of giving up. And we have others who have one of the women who lived in the most extreme poverty. How she's here today, I know it's the grace of God. And also several of our women who were sexually abused and went through domestic violence. So, we have had, and we do have one of our authors who was born with cerebral palsy. And all of them are active right now. They wrote their own storyline, and they're here to tell it as we speak, to be able to share with individuals that through whatever you went through, you can get through it through the grace of God.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for going through that list for me. I tell you, those, without even hearing the story, we know that there are going to be amazing stories just with what the subject is. Just to know that this person has gotten through. My listeners here have heard me, talk about the fact that I'm a breast cancer survivor. And any woman who has survived any form of cancer, I salute her, because it is quite an ordeal, and to be able to stand on, in victory over it, amazing, and may God continue to bless her. But of course, all the stories that you just shared about those women, that takes some fortitude. And I'm so happy that they are sharing how they were able to as well stand victorious. Now, we have things that have inspired us along the way. And like you mentioned with, the promptings that you get as children, and not really holding on to those things and carrying them on through adulthood. How did you feel when you were able to hold the finished copy of your book? That published work is now in your hands. How did you feel in that moment?
Dr. Chester, it was a feeling that sometimes is hard to explain. It was very emotional for me. I prayed on it. I thank God, because I knew that I could not do this by myself. I knew that I had to have God with me to get through it. So the feeling was a feeling of joy, inspiration, and the ability to let the world know the goodness of God in terms of getting me through the writing portion, and the fact that I was able to be known as a published author.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Congratulations on, fulfilling a dream. Look, I'm gonna say, of the prophecy that was spoken over you years ago, and making that happen once again. It is always an amazing thing. I love how God, uses each author to bring about a beautiful work of art. People say, well, you talk to authors all the time. And it's like, but each person's story is unique and different as they are. The subject may be the same, but everyone has a different story because it's theirs. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, for someone who is an aspiring author, I do like to ask my published authors if there is something that they learned along the way that they feel may be helpful to someone who is an aspiring author, be it that it's how to get over writer's block, or determining how you select your publisher, or self-publishing versus a publishing house, or times a day to write. Do you have any particular nugget of wisdom that you could share with someone who's an aspiring author?
Absolutely. Several things. Several things, Dr. Chester. One is that find a place. when I say find a place where you're comfortable to write. That's one. My place in where I originated and finished it was I used the public library in my community. And I used several. We had the Reading branch and the Bond Hill branch. I live in Cincinnati, and I used that because not only do they have the equipment for me to use, but also when you got staff and other resources that's needed. I strongly recommend to any aspiring authors to find a place. As I mentioned that the public library has been my place from beginning to end. It has allowed me to not only use the equipment there, but also have a steady place and have the staff and the support mechanism that you must need during your literary journey. In fact, as I mentioned, I use several libraries from the Cincinnati area. I use the Reading and the Bond Hill Library, and and the staff has been great to help me, and they do a celebration with me at the end of my journey. So I'll say that as one. The other thing, celebrate yourself during your literary journey. I cannot express enough about if it means after doing a chapter or two, celebrate yourself. And one may say, Dr. Chester, what do you mean, Greg, about celebrating yourself? What I mean is that take a time out. I don't care if you take yourself to lunch. And also, this is probably as critical as it can be, stop and pray. Let God know thank you. Thank you for letting me achieve and get through some of the obstacles that one will go through. And believe me, I went through some obstacles in my writing. I almost lost my transcript on a computer hack, and just happened one of the staff was able to save it for me. So yes, them are the inspirational pieces that I would share, and place yourself around positive people who are encouragers to you.
Oh, I am so glad that I asked you that question, because those are all amazing pieces of advice. And you know what? Thank you for mentioning take a break, take a pause, and celebrate yourself. I don't think that people do that. That was one of the greatest pieces of advice I have ever received career-wise. And I do that especially, well, I called it BC, before COVID, when we were filming for Daily TV. And we would film, everyone would come in studio and we would film, a lot of episodes back to back at one time. And after it was over, I would take everyone out to eat. If, any of my friends or family showed up, I would take them out, and we would have a really big, it's a wrap kind of dinner. And people said, you know what? That is amazing. Like, what a great way to end it. It's like, it was hard work, but I couldn't do this without all of you. So let me show you how much I appreciate you for coming on. You're right. And it was such a beautiful way to just say thank you, and look at what we have achieved. That is a great piece of advice. We have to celebrate
Thank you.
Those little things. I love it. Well, Greg Stallworth, I have so enjoyed my talk here with you today, and you have really you've inspired me to just keep going and keep doing what I'm doing, because
Thank you.
You're authentic in the way that you share. And I think that the audience can hear, our listeners can hear that as well. Thank you for coming on and being genuine about your book, and for really wanting to inspire others to be their best. Now, one last time, though, before I let you go, can you remind everyone of the title of your book, where we can get a copy, and, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes. The title our book is Behind My Storm. It can be purchased through Amazon. And our website to get in touch with us, to keep up on current events or any happenings that may be in your part of the country, you can go to www.behindmystorm.com. It's so simple because it's the title of the book.com.
I love it. Thank you again, Greg, for being a guest
Thank
on
you.
Daily Spark.
And thank you for allowing me.
Oh, of course. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us as well. Again, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we are going to share some inspirational poetry with you today. My guest is Jacqueline Cobb, and we're talking about her book, Words of Encouragement from My Father. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for joining me today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Thank you. So, as is tradition here, we give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. So, my first question to you is, what makes you you?
What makes me me is a born-again believer of Jesus Christ, and I love to encourage and uplift others. And I'm a mother, wife, and grandmother.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that that was simply the next thing along life's path?
It sort of like fell in my lap, per se. I went through a bout with depression, and I started using it as journaling, but in the form of prayer and poetry.
Now, the title of your book, Words of Encouragement from My Father, how did you select those words as the title for your book?
Well, like I said, I went through a little bout with depression, and I would feel very low, so I would ask God to give me the words to write on poems. I first was asked to do it in church, and I asked God to give me the words, and there have been times when I was feeling low that I would want to encourage others, and then when God gave me the words, I would read it for myself, and I was instantly encouraged because God gave me the words to write.
Absolutely. Now, when you were writing, did you find that you needed to be in a certain atmosphere, or at a particular time of day, the words just seemed to flow? Were you an early morning, late evening, off to yourself, or in the middle of Starbucks kind of person?
Well, I've always been mostly to myself, and most of the time I got inspired when I was going through something or stressed. So that relieved the stress. It's like journaling for me.
Absolutely. Now, did you realize at any particular age that words had power? when did it dawn on you that not only words in general, but your words in particular had some weight, that they could really influence an outcome?
Well, I first realized that words have power when I've always been a person that people will come and confide in. I'm a good listener, I'm concerned, and I love people. And I feel their pain sometimes. Just, being born again, you got discernment. So I would feel their pain and just listen, and then they would want to hear what I have to say about what they're going through. Or I can elaborate on what I went through in the past if I went through the same exact thing that they're going through.
Now, of course, without sharing it all, can you tell us a little bit about your book? What will someone who purchases your book, what will they find?
They will find that it's uplifting, it's encouraging, and most of all, is spiritual. Like I said, I was born again, and I'm born again now for going on 25 years, and I've been writing since 1996. After the bout with depression, the Lord put me in my mother's house when the enemy tried to convince me to commit suicide. So God filled me with the Holy Ghost right before the enemy can attack my mind for me to do something to myself. And I know that's love, because God touched me before I can even think about doing something to myself.
And I'm so glad that you came to that epiphany, that you've come to that reckoning. I've heard so many people say very similar stories, that they were they were right there at the brink of doing something that they know that they shouldn't have done, that they shouldn't be doing, and they say very, very loudly, very audibly. They heard God's voice, or they felt as though an angel pushed them and was like, no, don't do this. Is not what you are supposed to do. So thank you so much for sharing that. Someone else needs to understand that if it happened to them, that it really and truly is real. Now, when you were sharing and writing, did you have a particular reader in mind? Were you including like our teenagers as young as perhaps maybe 16 as an ideal reader, or do you think that someone needs to perhaps be just a little bit more mature and be older than a college student?
Well, really, teenagers as well as adults can benefit from the book, because it reaches a lot of people. I've been bullied before, I had low self-esteem at one point from the bullying. So I had a relationship with God, and I would pray to Him, and I would do things to uplift my spirit, and and especially reading the Bible, that helped me too. So I was like, always thinking about others and not myself. So I wanted to encourage others and lift their spirits, and to ask God to help me with the words to do that.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think we definitely need to remember to turn to God more often and stop thinking that we can do it all by ourselves. We definitely need God in our corner. Well, Jacqueline, it is time for us to take a break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes. The name of my book, the title of my book, is Words of Encouragement from My Father. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and anywhere books are sold. And also you can find me on Twitter and Facebook.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. My guest today is Jacqueline Cobb. So we're talking about her book of poetry entitled Words of Encouragement from My Father. I love it. I love it. I'm a daddy's girl, so I definitely have had words of encouragement from my father, and I appreciate each and every one of them. Now, my next question for you is about the process of it all.
Mm-hmm.
For so many authors, they are trying to decide if they want to self-publish or if they want to use a publishing house or a publishing company to assist them. Some people have time to do every step. Others will say, I just don't have the time. I need someone to do it for me. Which way did you decide to publish your book? Which way worked best for you?
Well, I collected the poems over the years. Like I said, I was writing poetry since 1996. And I reached out to Writers Branding. Well, they reached out to me first to do it. And I went through Writers Branding so that they can help me and show me how to, get it out there and everything.
So you did not self-publish. You chose to go with a publishing house then. All right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Now, when it comes to selecting a cover, that's another thing that many of our aspiring authors write in and ask us about. Like, how do we choose the proper cover? I know that if you self-publish versus using a publishing house, there's a different process. How did you come about selecting the cover for your book?
Okay, well, the whole layout, the Lord guided me through that. The cover of the book, I looked on the computer and I thought about what will catch the eye and what will and want people to just get the book from the appearance of the cover. So I thought about flowers and I typed in flowers in the Word, Microsoft Word, and it showed me that particular set of flowers. So I said, well, I will choose this one. And, of course, I prayed about it, and God was pleased with it. So, like I said, I just love encouraging people and just wanted to catch the eye so that they would want to get the book. Just pick it up and open it.
Absolutely. And how did it feel when you held that final copy of your published work in your hands? How did you feel in that moment?
It felt great because I accomplished a goal that I set, and I was so happy with myself because there have been times I procrastinated, but I'm glad I pushed through and got it done.
Absolutely. I can understand that. And you mentioned that old P word and that procrastination word.
Oh, yeah.
And there are so many people that say the same thing. It's like, man, Dr. Angela, I had one author that I interviewed years ago. He said, I put off writing my book for like 10 years. He said, and I thought that, it would go away, but God did not let me run from what I was supposed to do.
That's
he said,
right.
I finally just wrote the book. And I felt so much better. I was like, procrastination for real.
Yes.
So that is so funny. I have to kind of, cheerfully laugh at that or giggle at that because it's like when you're supposed to do it, you're supposed to do it. So
that's right.
You definitely end up walking in that purpose. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Now, how do you suggest that someone read your book? Should they read it from cover to cover? Should they read it page by page, more so like a devotional? What's your suggestion there?
Well, yeah, they can read it as a devotional. I consider the book as a devotional as well because it speaks more about God and how we can count on Him and depend on Him to bring us through any situation or circumstance. So, of course, I would love for people to consider it, in that way.
Absolutely. Now, for so many of my authors, I love asking this question because it really helps inspire those budding authors out there, and that is the question on success. You know, in our world, when we think of a successful person, we tend to put them with material things. You know, they have a big house, a fancy car, you know, exotic vacations. But authors, some of them want those things, others don't, but they're still successful authors. So when you think of a successful author, an author who has, quote unquote, made it, what does that look like? What does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is a successful author, first of all, has to have an audience of people who are very interested in the book. And word of mouth is one way of the book getting out there also. And being humble also will help the person to, you know, get their work out there in a relationship, most of all, a relationship with God, because He is the head of my life. I can't do nothing without Him, and I need His help in every way. So God is the source of everything, and a lot of people don't feel like He's needed, but He is the source of everything. He will open doors that we couldn't even get open on our own. So God is my source of that's my source of success.
Now, for so many authors, choosing their style of writing is something that they're not very conscious of it. You know, they just kind of start writing in the style that seems to just flow from their spirit. Did you find that writing this particular book was easiest to write it as poetry? Were you thinking of writing it as a novel? How did you determine that you would share it with us in the style of poetry?
Well, you know, like I was saying, I was writing since 1996. I was just asked in the church program to write a poem. So I prayed, I asked God, give me the words. So He gave me the words, and I was like, you know, I like this. And also my daughter, Charmaine, she passed away, but before she died, she told me, Mom, you should write your words on paper just to get it off you as journaling, because it helps. So I incorporated that also, you know, as journaling and prayer as I wrote the poetry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she is very right. As a counselor, that is something that I suggest to my clients. And I think that sometimes people think that you have to be going through something in order to journal. Absolutely not. Journaling sometimes can just be your little book of praises, of prayer and praises. And I know that I too journal, you know, just to write down, Lord, this is what I'm praying about. This is what I'm standing on. And I discussed it with another author. I said, you put that date, and then when it comes true, I put that date down, and then I go, look at God. And it is amazing how He is really able to work through our things.
Like a vision board. Yes.
In a way, absolutely. And I tell folks, if it works for you, don't knock it. You know, someone else may not do it. If it works for you, then keep utilizing that resource. I love that. I love it. Now, do you plan on writing more books? I know for many authors, they say, I've written one and I'm done. Others say, I've been bitten by the author's bug, Dr. Angela. I have to keep writing. Where do you feel that you fall into place there, Jacqueline?
Well, I plan to write many more books, especially poetry books. I'm leaning on prayer books as well, and also children's books. Because when I started out, I wanted to do children's books, but I just, like I said, poetry just sort of fell in my lap because I was asked to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, my last question for you is about your bits of wisdom. Um, One of the things that we suggest always is that if you want to know how to do something successfully, you talk to someone who is successfully doing what you want to do. So my question for you is, again, for those aspiring art authors out there, what is a bit of advice that you wish you would have known when you started the writing process that would have made writing your book a lot easier? What bit of advice can you give to them?
Well, the advice I would give them is, if you feel strongly about something, a subject or whatever, and you have a story behind the subject, go ahead and put it on paper and work through it and pray through it and see where it takes you, because this was the last thing I thought would happen. I didn't know it was going to get this much exposure, but I was so I was earnest about doing it. Just any time, a night or day, I was getting inspired and write poetry. And the selection, I just chose it from a list of poems that I've already written. But if you have a voice about something and you want people to hear it, just be positive and, be prayerful, and that it gets out there, that God helps you to get it out there, and He will lead people in your pathway to help you along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that is part of my prayer every day, is that not only am I placed on another person's path to help them, but other people will be placed on my path to help me. We all need to get to our God-given destination. So I love that. Jacqueline Cobb, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. But before I let you go, one last time, could you remind everyone the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Yes. The title of my book is Words of Encouragement from My Father. You can find it on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, and where books are sold. And also you can find me on Twitter and Facebook.
Thank you again for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for spending some time with us here today. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.